Hello everyone, Rorius here, back with the Portal 2 developer commentary. Now, we're just finishing off with a bonus episode. There's a few of these levels you can do, the few of the developer commentary chapters you can do from the co-op campaign. I don't believe you need a second person to do it, so we can just go in and listen to some stuff about the it'll be developer commentary stuff about the co-op campaign. But yeah, of course you don't need to play with a player, because I imagine it would be quite difficult to listen to developer commentary in co-op, you know. It would be a strange thing to do with a live,
Did you notice I didn't even stay to the end
person.
of your last test? I was confident you could finish. Do you know where I was? I was outside watching some deer frolic. You don't even care about the outside, do you?
Nope. I'm a robot. Actually, I think at the moment we're still Shell, aren't we? I wonder. Can we see ourselves? I need to find a point where I can see myself. Oh, no, wait, am I? No, I am Shell. You can just see in the corner there. It's just Shell. Alrighty, let's listen to this first node.
In our first implementation, gestures were automatically selected based on the player's context. For example, blue might do a special gesture when standing on a floor button. Players became bored of seeing these gestures so quickly that they stopped using them before discovering any of the special context. Because of this, we decided to give players control of gestures as a way to express themselves. But when shown the full set from the start, they were overwhelmed by all the choices. By awarding gestures as the game progresses, we allow players to familiarize themselves with each gesture in turn. Leaving visible empty slots in the gesture wheel lets players anticipate that they'll be rewarded with cool new gestures as they progress. The gesture wheel provides quick access so that players can feel comfortable tossing out a gesture during downtime, letting them pick the perfect moment to share a high five.
Yeah, I actually do really like the fact that they built the gesturing into the narrative. So, like, your characters start doing it as you're progressing through the story, through the game.
We have a taunt where one robot steals the other's core. When implemented, it was the only taunt that required one person to initiate. Because of this, we were afraid that it would be used for griefing. We were in the process of rethinking our approach when early playtesters rated this as their favorite taunt. It was also the most used team taunt because it only required one player to initiate and was easier to use than the others. We ended up changing all the other team taunts to emulate the way stealing the core works.
Yeah. I actually really love the co-op stuff in this game. Unfortunately, I have hardly played it at all, because I've only played it, I think I played the whole thing through twice? Oh, maybe 3 times. I think twice with Daniel, my friend, you know, the one who made mod with me, and the one who was sort of equally excited for this game. And I think once more with another friend, I don't remember who, but I remember going through it again.
Airlocks were introduced mainly as a way to allow players to focus on individual puzzles. In some of our early investigations, areas contained puzzles that were meant to be solved as a group, as well as others that were for individual solution. But we found that if players could move freely between them, they logically assumed that the individual puzzles were part of one big puzzle. This had bad results. For clarity, we created these airlock-like spawn rooms that act as checkpoints between puzzles. Once both players entered the airlock, we lock off access.
Yeah, and it's good because it's a relay point for adding another spawn, so that if your characters die, they don't have to go back to the very start of the level, they can go back to these checkpoints. I believe most of the elements have just been disabled for this mode. We'll listen to the... I'm gonna jump through here. Just to remind myself what happens.
In Left 4 Dead 2, we authored simple, fogged, black versions of the world as monolithic models to avoid the CPU overhead of rendering the world again for water reflections. This worked well for the Left 4 Dead 2 outdoor environments where most light comes from the sky. But Portal 2 is almost entirely indoors, so the color and value of the world geometry is apparent in the water reflections. Since the Portal 2 world geometry is relatively simple, we automatically build a version of the world geometry that has a single texture that combines both lighting and surface shading, along with another texture that has just surface shading. The latter texture is used when rendering dynamic lights. These textures are at the same spatial resolution as the light maps and get packed into a single large atlas texture per level. Drawing this simple world imposter takes very little CPU time, which was a limited resource on Portal 2 due to the many portal views, split-screen views, and water reflection views that we needed to render. We initially planned on using the world imposters only for water reflection rendering, but we ended up using it to improve the performance in split-screen mode, where it is used for rendering distant portals and portals that are 2 levels deep. We also used the world imposters to render water in full-screen co-op mode, to give us some performance overhead, since the co-op mode has more portal views to render than single-player mode.
Okay. Some just interesting, sort of jargon for relating to the reflections and where they draw them and where they
Normally in
them.
games when players die, they see this as a big failure. But in Portal, death is a normal part of the puzzle-solving experience. In co-op, death not only happens more frequently, but it can happen at the hands of your partner. Purely accidentally, of course. We felt it was important to not only make death no big deal, but to make it fun. Early on, we tried some elaborate death animations, such as showing your robot slowly getting crushed under a giant crusher. These were awesome to watch, but they quickly became repetitive. Also, after a very short while, players grew afraid to take risks. The fear of having to wait a long time before trying again prevented them from simply playing and experimenting in a spirit of fun. We had to find the right balance where death was quick enough to be a non-penalty and elaborate enough to be visceral and satisfying. A fun payoff for creative play.
Yeah, so having... I mean, that was a really long, drawn-out version of the way you die. Yeah, actually, I remember them talking about the fact that because you're playing together, you know, there's 2 people playing, one person dying shouldn't be the end of the play. Like, one person, they wanted it... It's one of the reasons they brought in the robots, actually, is that they didn't want one person being killed. They wanted to have an explanation for why, if you die as one player, you can just come back in. They didn't want to have to end the game if one person died. And so they originally had this character Mel, who was, I think it was going to be Shell and Mel, or someone and Mel, who were going to be the cooperative test subjects. But because of that fact, they didn't want to end as I said, they didn't want to end the game abruptly when one of the players dies. So they created the bots, and naturally when the bots die, you want there to be sort of a meaningful representation of their death while also keeping the gameplay, you know, at a good pace. And so that's just a really interesting insight into the development processes behind that kind of thing. Alrighty, so I think we've seen 5, this should be 6.
We noticed that after playtesters had solved a difficult puzzle together, they'd sometimes pause before funneling through the exit door to repeatedly jump up and down in excitement. We realized that these meeting places would be the perfect time to allow players to high-five each other and celebrate their victory in style.
Yeah.
Our first interface attempt had one player initiate a high-five by holding their hand up and waiting. The other player could join in by selecting the same gesture. If they were standing in the correct positions relative to each other, they'd pull off a high-five. But learning the correct place to stand was too difficult, so we decided to automatically move the bots into the correct position for the high-five. Sometimes, however, the player who wanted to high-five would be left hanging as the other player ran ahead without accepting. Increasing the time that the initiator waited with his hand up gave the other player time to return and accept. But being frozen into place for more than a few seconds was too frustrating. So finally, we made players auto-accept the team gestures. Now when the mood strikes either player, the game always ensures a successful celebration.
Yeah, but having said that, there is still, if the player is too far away when the high five is initiated, your character will sit there for a second with his hand up, and then eventually be like, oh. So you can still be left hanging if you initiate too early. Alrighty, number 7.
Something that really surprised us was how often playtesters stated that they loved the basic experience of handing off a cube to their partner. Players didn't expect such a fundamental physical interaction to just work in a game.
Yeah.
Before trying it for the first time, they would discuss their plan as if it were some unique or special new game mechanic. When it just worked, they were overjoyed.
Yeah, actually that's an interesting thing. Most games, when a player picks up an object, like if you look at the Half-Life Deathmatch games, I think Half-Life Deathmatch worked like this. Yeah, if you picked up something physical, and the other player couldn't just easily pick it up unless they might have been able to do with the gravity gun, but I actually don't remember. But yeah, so the idea of lifting something up and then getting the other player to grab it from you feels like an ordeal. Or not an ordeal, sorry. It feels like an accomplishment, purely because you think that you're going to have to go through this arduous process of sort of like lifting it up and then like letting it go and having the other player quickly grab it for you. But in Portal 2, because they wanted this to be a thing, you know, one player's up the top here and the other player needs to give them the box. If you just press E, you know, if you just pick up the box while the other player's holding it, you automatically take it off of them. And so, yeah, really cool, like, cooperative interactions happen seamlessly in this game. I really wish I could have played this more. And I think it's probably, I was going to say, one of the problems was that playing with people who hadn't already played it is really frustrating, because you know what to do and they don't. But I think it's been long enough that I don't remember how these puzzles work that I could probably play it with someone new. And we'd have a blast refiguring it out. Yeah, anyway, this should be 8.
Early on, we realized that trying to tell your partner where to go, where to
This is a good
look,
one.
or where to place a portal was going to be really hard. Even with voice chat, saying over there doesn't give enough information to your partner within the 3D space. Players kept wanting to get up and point directly at their partner's screen. We developed
Yeah.
the ping tool to address this problem. Because the ping tool was so important, we decided to train players in its use before we did anything else. We held back on the vast majority of player actions and let the players focus entirely on the ping tool. This is why the co-op bots start separated in a tube, without even the ability to walk or shoot a portal.
Yeah, at the very start of the co-op campaign, if you haven't seen it, both bots start in a tube, in the tubes that you normally get delivered into the chambers in, and you're separated by a wall, and you're given an interaction with GLaDOS that you don't get to see, or you might just get to see a brief part of it, but you don't directly interact with each other. The very start of the game has you using these point commands, using these like ping commands, to point at certain objects on a screen in front of you that GLaDOS is telling you to point at, basically. And the idea is to get you used to the concept of using that ping tool to command your friends where to go and where to shoot portals and that kind of thing. And there are different pings depending on what you want them to do. And I remember them talking about that being a thing because they wanted players to be able to play with, you know, anyone else. They didn't necessarily have to be in the same room. That extends right through to, you know, Steam copies of the game could be played with PlayStation copies of the game. So that theoretically you'll be playing with someone completely out, you know, not in the same house, not in the same room, maybe not even in the same country. So, you know, maybe not even of the same language. So having like a universal ping tool, you know, it's like it's a universal language. You know, if everyone understands the ping tool from their own perspective, then anyone can play with anyone else and utilize the ping tool, and it should be all good. So wait, that was 8, wasn't
Early
it?
on.
Yep, 8. So this one should be 9.
Several puzzles in the game require the players to take on distinct, intertwined roles. We called these asymmetric chambers trust puzzles, because one
Trust
player is
puzzles,
often
yeah.
placing their life in the hands of the other. When one player accidentally kills the other, it almost always ends in laughter. So much laughter that we sometimes had to question if it really was a legitimate accident. These puzzles also require players to stay in constant communication, which naturally leads to some great moments of cooperative bonding. While some teams found these stressful, for many partners, these puzzles were their favorite type.
Yeah.
But everyone agreed that they added much-needed variety and a nice change of pace. And by swapping roles, each player can get an entirely different experience within the exact same puzzle.
Yeah, actually, some of these combined puzzles are so cool. Having, like, your own portals placed, going through, like, a jump, and then going through someone else's portals that they've placed, or going through their portals and then through secondary versions of their portals, you know, having either being the person firing portals or leaping through random portals placed is just so cool. Yeah, if you haven't played the co-op campaign, do it. What's wrong?
Most players don't realize that the ping tool is context sensitive. When they're playing voice enabled, players usually rely on the look portion of the ping tool. Without voice, icons such as press the button or stand here become much more important.
Yeah, yeah. As I was saying before, like the different, if you ping like a button, I thought it was actually a separate ping, but maybe if it's just the same ping tool, I don't actually remember now, but whatever the case, you can ping like an object, which means that object will highlight for the other player to tell them to utilize it. But you can also ping a timer version of the ping, and I know there's a bunch of different ping tools. Yeah, the one that we saw down there is just the default ping, and that's just for like a stand here or a portal here or whatever, depending on the context. Right, so this is the end of the chamber. Yeah, normally at the end of all the co-op chambers, you, as the bot, go into those little tube things and you're deconstructed and then reassembled elsewhere. Because you're just a piece of equipment. You're just a piece of equipment. Alrighty, so we're going to the hub. Yeah, so the hub area is the main area. It's like a lobby. It's like a cooperative lobby. And from there you can go to all the different levels. I actually love the hub area. I actually think this area is so cool. And something similar to this is what we actually had in mind for an aspect of the Portal Unity mod that we made. We had this idea for a hub type setup. I don't think we even knew that there was going to be a hub in Portal 2 at that point, but we had this idea for a hub setup, but it didn't really go anywhere. There's still remnants of it in the mod. If you play the mod up to, I think it's the map file's test chamber 09, but it's there's an area where you reach a room where there's a million elevators all coming to the same room, and you walk onto a hallway, and there's three separate paths that lead to tubes. Originally, there was going to be 3 separate campaigns, basically, and you could choose which one you wanted to play. We left it in with the thought that maybe in the future, if we ever had time, we would add sort of like more difficult versions or just alternative versions of the test chambers. I was thinking of even making one of them the like advanced versions of the test chambers, like in Portal 1. But nothing ever really came of that, and we just left it in because I love that room for the sort of emotional reasons, I guess, emotional purpose of it. So it was of course going to be left in, but it's a remnant of an idea that we had before. Anyway, let's just do this.
In laying out the structure of our hub, we had a number of challenges that were new and specific to co-op play. We have to assume that each player has made different progress throughout the game, playing with different partners. Starting in the neutral center of the hub was a way of making sure that they had a chance and place to coordinate. Players needed a way to agree on where to go, and a way to visualize each other's completion data. As they played, they needed concrete feedback on how much progress they had made. In seeking solutions, we felt it was important to keep the player in the game space, rather than resorting to menus and UI that would take them out of the game. Therefore, players can clearly see their status over the doors, and they navigate by walking to the course in the 3D space. GLaDOS is there to connect the experience to the single-player game, while also holding the player's hands a bit to keep the co-op goals and feedback clear.
Yeah, see, I was one of those people who I just played the whole co-op campaign with Daniel, my friend. The next time I sort of played the game, I helped one of my other friends play it, and so I just joined his game, and we played through what was left, I think. I feel like I played it at least twice with Daniel, and then I played it at least once with someone else, but other than that, I never really came back to these chambers. It's kind of sad. I actually love the co-op campaign, but...
The visual design of robots began with lots of concept art. The initial round of concepts explored all kinds of forms, from human to the more abstract. We found ourselves gravitating towards shapes that reminded us of the sphere and the turret in the original Portal. Whilst
turret.
Keeping with the established Portal design aesthetic, we were keen to create all new characters, and being a duo, it was important that they were their own separate designs, rather than identical copies of each other.
Yeah.
Unlike, for instance, Team Fortress 2, where a clean silhouette is essential for communicating the nature of a character, we had an opportunity here to play with designs that were a bit messy, with things sticking out of them so they looked half manufactured, half improvised. Once we had agreed on rough designs in 2D, we began to build the shapes in 3D, and this is where the next level of improvisation and experimentation occurred.
I always played Peabody.
Usually, a model will be designed and built in 3D and then rigged for animation, but here we allowed the rigging process to inform the models. We wanted to celebrate the mechanics of robots.
Yeah.
We allowed function to dictate form, and in terms of detail, they started to design themselves once you start thinking about motors, ball joints, actuators, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The classic duo is often made up of two contrasting body types, short and squat next to tall and wiry. And it's not hard to see Laurel and Hardy, C-3PO and R2-D2 in these characters. Even though we had the freedom to make our silhouettes a bit untidy, it was still important that they remain readable as anthropomorphic bipeds. We wanted players to feel free to make mischief for their partners, in a typically human way, but without creating any kind of gore. The robots were perfect for this.
Yeah, I actually love their designs. I always played Peabody. For whatever reason, I just liked Peabody. So yeah, that was my character of choice.
Our initial goal in designing the hub was to provide players with a lot of choices so that they could sample a variety of game types. The idea was that if they got stuck or needed a break, they could pick another test chamber or another mechanic to explore. In reality, this prevented us from doing sufficient training and limited the overall scope of the puzzles. With such a flat structure, it was much harder to layer old mechanics onto new ones, because we couldn't guarantee that players understood what they needed to know to solve a puzzle. By going linear, we could guarantee prior knowledge and provide a much better experience, more satisfying pacing, and a story that gathered momentum over a long period of time.
Yeah, so that's the thing with the hub, is that it is still somewhat linear as far as I recall, or you are required to get through a certain amount of the levels in one area to unlock the next area. I don't remember if you have to finish all of them to get through to the next area, but yeah, you are required to have a certain amount of knowledge in certain areas before you can move on to later areas. Yeah, this one still says it's locked up here, the hard light services one. I think it's going to slowly unlock all of them as I'm listening to them. Or at least I might do. That's weird. 3 is locked, but 4 is not. That's weird. Anyway.
In our original robot designs and the first animation tests, we started with the premise that, being robots, their movement should have limited personality and be a bit more mechanical. The feedback of our game testers and the reaction of our fans to the trailers convinced us that a more whimsical approach to the animation would lead to a better experience. So we moved away from a sterile approach and found a whole new range of possibilities as we began to explore their personalities and gestures.
Yeah, I actually like the idea. It's reflected in the story. Not quite what he was saying there, but I like the fact that when you first start, you are just robots, and GLaDOS has built you for your testing, and that's it. That's you're just robots. I like the idea that as you go through, GLaDOS is for whatever reason trying to make you get angry at each other, just trying to intentionally pit you against each other, but the robots continually prove that they're above that, or prove that they are better than just robots, and they start to become friends. They start to show emotional relation between each other. They start, high-fiving and waving at the cameras and stuff like that, and just being like nice, friendly robots.
Since the co-op characters can die at any time, we needed a way to rebuild them quickly and often. Therefore, in co-op, we replaced the elevators that connected test chambers in single player with disassembly machines. These are meant to reinforce the idea that since the robots are disposable, being destroyed is no big deal. In the robot world, it happens all the time.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Alrighty, so that was number 5. Now we're 6 and 7. I'm going to assume that they're in these other areas. God. So 6,
the orange bot has been described as finicky, and you can see elements that are somewhat bird-like and even reminiscent of the Odd Couple's Felix Unger. The gotta pee idle dance was born out of the idea that current bipedal robots are constantly needing to readjust in order to find their balance. Because Orange's design is rather unstable, the motion design solution was kind of a perpetual motion needed to maintain his balance.
Yeah, I like that idea. He's always like, ooh. Alrighty, was one more. I don't think it's up there. I don't think that one's allowed. I don't think you can get up there. I think to get up there, I think you need this active. This turns into a aerial faith plate that will launch you back up. It'll probably be down here. Yeah.
If the orange bot is the odd couple's Felix, then blue is Oscar. Blue was meant to be an early and rather rough prototype robot, representing GLaDOS's first attempt at making a bipedal testing bot.
Yeah.
Compared to the sleek lines of orange, he's much less elegant.
Yeah.
For motion inspiration, we looked to some of our favorite real-life robots, such as the Big Dog robot from MIT and the towel-folding robot from Hitachi.
Yeah, much more sort of clunky and because it's, you know, it's she's trying to make these robots, you know, as testing robots, and she's just testing on these things. She's gone for the first thing that she's thought of, and that is the personality spheres. Now, can I just walk in here and end it? Yeah, I can. Okay. Yeah. So, we're nearly there. 2 of the 3. Let's get... What's the third one again? Oh, the security room, yeah. So, this will probably talk more about the levels between. Once you reach the end of a hub, you get like a desk, and they'll probably talk a bit more about that sort of section of the cooperative experience. Oh, some of these puzzles around here, they're the most technically, like, some of them are the most technically impossible due to the laws that Portal puts in place. But they're so cool. Some of them are so cool, and the old Aperture parts of the cooperative experience with the gels and the hard light bridges and stuff. Oh, some of the stuff there is just so cool.
It took a while for us to dial in the right approach for the co-op bot vocalizations. Initially, we recorded some in-house vocal performances and processed them heavily, with the resulting sounds being very robotic. However, as the animations being created for the bots were so broad and expressive, we soon realized we were going to need to try a different sonic approach.
Yeah.
After a few more in-house experiments, we brought in D. Bradley Baker, who we had worked with to create the voices for some of Left 4 Dead's Special Infected.
And for the Anger Core in Portal 1.
We worked with D to come up with 2 distinct vocal and character approaches for the bots and recorded a range of responses for each. Afterward, 2 of our sound designers each took on one of the voices and came up with a unique sound processing approach to create a distinct sonic personality for each bot that still allowed the energy and expression of D's performances to shine through. In the following samples, you can hear what they sounded like in D's original performance, and the result after the sound designers got through with them.
Peabody. See, I love Peabody. I freaking love Peabody. Yeah, so that's actually really interesting. What they did is they got 2 different sound engineers essentially to make 2 different methods for altering the sound to make it sound robotic. That's actually really cool. Yeah.
It's important to give co-op players a way to coordinate their action. Seeing how our players naturally wanted this ability, we decided to support it with the ping timer and ended up designing some puzzles around it.
The ping timer,
due to lag and other issues, syncing up actions over voice chat turned out to be rather difficult.
Yeah.
Therefore, we created the countdown timer as a way for players to keep in sync.
Yeah.
It's completely predictable. Both players see the go at the same instant, and the clocks run in sync even if they're on different systems.
Yeah, because they're sort of technically synced via the sort of server side as opposed to the client side, so yeah, that's really cool. Alright, so that was number 2 as far as I recall, so it should be 3.
This puzzle requires one of Portal's trickiest logical leaps. Early playtesters often took longer than their patience would allow, and were nearly ripping out their hair by the time they'd finally solved it. But almost everyone insisted that the payoff was by far their favorite moment in all of co-op. We significantly reduced the average solution time by adding a puzzle just before this where 2 cubes repeatedly collide, but this almost completely robbed the appeal from what was once a high moment. So instead we decided to make a few subtle adjustments and leave players with the responsibility to make the final leap. First, we added a puzzle 4 chambers earlier to teach players to fling by cutting their hard light bridge and falling into a surface directly below.
I was just about to do that.
We then subconsciously primed the thought of mid-air collision by having players repeatedly ricochet weighted spheres against a hard light bridge. Finally, we designed this room's layout, lighting, and decals so that players would see the entire space as a symmetrical whole and visualize the bot's fling path. By planting shards of the idea in their heads, we allow players to own that exciting dual collision epiphany while keeping their sanity intact.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, this hard light bridge here isn't there. And either, or is it? No, I'm pretty sure they've added that so that you can, as a single player, you can get to the end. Yeah, I think what he was saying there, as far as I recall, the solution to this one is for you both to be flying through the portal and smash into each other in the middle and fall directly down. I think that's what you're supposed to do. So you're both supposed to get up on here. One of you stands above here, one of you stands above that one, and then you both do this at the same time so that you both smash into each other. Yeah, one flying from there, one flying from there. I think that's how this ends up being solved. Of course, because, yeah, I'm playing the developer commentary by myself. Because you can only play it by yourself. They've made a version that's solvable for a single player.
For a while, we were on the fence about whether to keep the team taunt hug in the game. Some felt it wasn't suitably robotic, while others had a concern that perhaps it showed too much emotion for these characters.
Yeah.
But once it was animated for a trade show trailer, many of our concerns were washed away by the positive reaction of the fans. It was a huge success.
There's that trailer that they released that has Peabody Atlas running ahead and Peabody falling behind, just sort of minding his own business, and Atlas hits a button and he's like, what the hell did that do? And then Peabody's immediately crushed by a crusher. Atlas is horrified at first, like, and then Peabody, of course, just gets rebuilt and comes running towards him, and he's just like, hey! And then Atlas is like, yeah, you're safe, and he hugs him, and it's like...
The levels in Portal 2 are much more complex than in the first game, and as a result, we've had to beef up the player movement algorithms. The player is represented as an axis-aligned box in the world, which creates a problem for portal teleportation because portal teleportation is almost never axis-aligned. To improve how we handle this, we trace the player as the axis-aligned bounding box they would use on each side of a portal simultaneously, and merge the results into something usable. We have to predict quite a bit more than previous Source Engine games because portals and projected entities change the way the player moves through the world. Prediction itself is a mind-bending headache when dealing with portals. We're already dealing with a non-linear space, now we also have to deal with non-linear time in a non-linear space.
Oh, right, of course, multiplayer. Oh god. I can't even freaking replicate the just normal Portal, Portal solo. Oh god, imagine trying to do that via server-client communication. Oh my god.
Writing GLaDOS for co-op introduces some interesting problems. In single player, you can count on players paying attention and being caught up in important moments. In co-op, you can count on 2 players chatting about what they just did as GLaDOS delivers an important line.
Yeah.
To help with this issue, we broke up the story beats into smaller sections so players don't become impatient. We also repeat the points multiple times to ensure the message sinks in even if you missed it a few times. Lastly, we also give players room to talk. For example, when you die, there's a 2-second beat for you to laugh or yell before GLaDOS speaks. It's important to give those places for players to speak because the best part of co-op is the shared experience.
Yeah. So yeah, it's something that you might not initially think about, but the fact that it's part of the reason why the developer commentary is only 1 player for the for the co-op section is that listening to someone talk for an extended period doesn't really work in multiplayer, and so. Yeah, they've had to adjust the way they do GLaDOS as well, just because, people wouldn't listen half the time. So yeah, it just cuts out because that's the end of the developer commentary. Alright, so this is still took a little while, but I was going to say, this felt like a lot shorter of an episode than usual, but I guess because it involved no mental thought in terms of puzzle solution than previous episodes. But nevertheless, thank you so much for watching. In a few hours, there'll be the second part of the Aperture Tag developer commentary stuff. I very much enjoy the developer commentary playthroughs. I have a whole bunch of games lined up, but they're almost all Valve games or mods of Valve games. That's cool. I love Valve games. I'm a huge fan of, at least I'm a huge fan of sort of 10 years ago Valve. 5 years ago. 5 years? 5? Between 5 and 10 years ago Valve. Well, from when they founded to about 5 years ago. I loved Valve very much. Getting kind of sick of their shit recently, just because they haven't done anything major. I know that they're working on VR stuff, but I want a good narrative like Portal 2 or Half-Life 2. I want one of those games. Those are the games that I love of Valve's. I think they're the best games. Oh. Anyway, so yeah, I'll slowly make my way through different developer commentary games and just talk. Well, we can just discuss. We can just talk about all of the stuff that goes into making those games, mods, whatever. Yeah, I think it's doing this as well is helping spur me on to actually work on projects again. Is I've been, I won't say lazy, but I've been sort of procrastinating, and I haven't been getting on to any of my projects as of recent. So, yeah, this is actually helping. This is seriously helping with my motivation and continuing to do that kind of thing. So yeah, once again, thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, hit like. If you want to see more of my stuff, then subscribe. More developer commentary stuff and more Let's Plays coming up every day. I make a video every day. at least one, often two. So yeah. I always say thank you so much for watching at the start and at the end of my outro. It's weird, but nevertheless, as always,